I guess my question first to you is, did you know I thought you were special when I met you 18, 19 years ago?
You were a warm hearted person who took an interest in me, and I enjoyed coming into your office and being around you. If I needed something to keep me occupied, you were more than willing to find something for me to do and include me. And I think more than anything, that's what I was looking for, was for somebody to include me and made me feel welcome, and I needed that.
So our story started, for me, it started about 21 years ago, even before I met you. And I moved to Alaska to be a CEO of a hospital. And I was on a journey to be a director before I was 30. I had been so focused that I had lost relationships because all I really wanted was a career. When I came to Alaska, it was a 3-year journey. The humor of it was I was really a mama's girl. For my mom to pick Alaska, so far away from Texas, was more about the fact that she saw on Oprah that there were 10 men for every one woman. And so she was like, go to Alaska, you'll find Mr. Right. So, not really necessarily looking for Mr. Right. I was looking for a career that I thought was kind of in my future. So, I came here, I worked at Charter. About 2.5 years into my 3-year commitment, I became friends with Deirdre, who is the executive director of Covenant House. She used to constantly kid me about, gee, you need a mission. She's like, you're so career focused, but I really think that there's a kind person inside there. And it was a really kind of a funny joke because I used to say, yeah, I'm really kind. And she's like, yeah, not so much. You're a little hard. So one day I had fulfilled my 3-year commitment. It was time for me to go back to Texas. And I realized that Covenant House was in trouble. They had one grant that was really supplying about 85% of their budget. At the time, it was about $1 million budget. And Deirdre came to me and she said, Alison, I need your help. Like, you write business plans, you run hospitals, help me write a grant. And I said, well, I've never written a grant. And she's like, well, you wrote a master's thesis. Surely you can put together a little grant. I said, well, I'm getting ready to leave. And she's like, if you do this grant and you help Covenant House, then I'll believe that you actually have a big heart inside there. So I wrote the grant. Covenant House was awarded the amount. At that time, I decided that I wasn't ready to leave Alaska. I called the company that I worked for and I asked them to postpone my transfer, and I started volunteering at Covenant House. That was 20 years ago. So I went from a volunteer to an employee, and really what I realized was at that point in my life, I had the ability and I had the desire to care about people outside of my scope of just a career. And so in starting to work at Covenant House, there were times that I would engage young people that were receiving services, and then there were times that I really stayed in my office and didn't. I remember one time you walked into my office and you were really angry at the people in the front, and you said, I'm just going to quit school. I don't care. People here don't care. I don't want to do this. And I remember thinking, here is this young person, beautiful smile, just wants someone to kind of challenge her on this thinking. And I said, okay, well, quit today and then start back over again tomorrow. And it was kind of the philosophy that my mom had always told me. In doing that, I remember thinking that this young person will probably always be in my life. And it was a very different feeling than I'd ever had. We have relationships with people, or we meet people with no expectation that we'll ever be a part of their life for a long term. But I'd love to hear your story again about what brought you to Covenant House and what you were looking for.
My parents got divorced by the time I was 2. So neither one of them were really ready to have kids. And so I ended up being used kind of as a tool to punish each other. And by the time I was 14 years old, I hadn't spent a single school year in one school. I had gone from mom's house to dad's house to grandparents' house to aunt and uncle's house and back to mom's house. My mom had kidney failure and was in and out of the hospital. She had already had 2 kidney transplants by the time I was 14, and she was going in for open heart surgery, and so she sent me to Alaska from California to live with an aunt. And I had met my aunt before, but I didn't have a very strong relationship with her. She didn't have any children, and she really wanted to be a parent, but she didn't necessarily have the tools to be a parent. And at 14, I was done being passed around and definitely didn't want another person to try to be my parent. So I came up to live with her, and it lasted about 6 months. At that point, I had turned 15, and she was really frustrated with me. And I didn't want to be there. Like, I wanted to go back to California to be with my mom, which wasn't an option. And so she brought me to Covenant House the first time I was 15. And I think her goal was to try to show me how things could be. But I didn't see that. What I saw was, here's a place that wants to help me and is willing to listen to me and cares about what I think.